Okay, Dad, today is Friday, April 12th, and we got a lot to talk about. I feel like the Middle East is this powder keg and the fuse has been lit. The latest I saw is on the news just an hour ago, 2 hours ago on RT, is that a strike is imminent. They're saying within the next 48 hours. Um,
Yeah, though I did hear that 48 hours ago too. So,
so do you feel like things are imminent? That there is.
well, that's certainly. I mean, there are all kinds of rumors and reports, as you say, and I think more importantly, there are always going to be these rumors. There's always going to be these reports, but more importantly, the leadership in Iran has been saying that they definitely will retaliate in a substantial way. Now, you know, they haven't said when they're going to do it, of course, and they may be just letting Israel, and the U.S. panic for a while, and maybe it'll come later. Maybe it'll come in 2 weeks or 2 months or something. So, but it could very well happen in the next 48 hours. We have no idea. Again, it's just Iran is letting us all guess.
How do you think this will play out? Do you think that Israel may try to strike first? First of all, we should make it clear that when I said the powder keg, the fuse was lit. I would say the fuse really got lit for this powder keg when Iran struck the embassy.
Not Iran, Israel.
Sorry, Israel struck the Iranian embassy in Syria.
Right.
Would you say that that's fair? That's what really.
Yeah, it was a major escalation, and it was, a real severe. International law is always being violated. To say that it was a violation of international law is not to is to really is to fail to recognize the enormity of what they did. It was really a sacred sort of understanding among all nations that even in wartime, you do not strike the embassy or consular, building of your enemy. It's just not done. It didn't even happen in World War II. The Nazis didn't do it. But Israel did it. And so this is a major escalation and something that clearly was, I think, intended to provoke a response.
To provoke a response and to drag the United States in
right.
as well.
Well, I think what it comes down to is that Israel has got itself into a real fix. I mean, the attack, the genocidal war against Gaza has been a disaster for them, on all counts. Whether you look at it, if from a military perspective or diplomatic, or they are turning into an international pariah. About the only two countries that really support them solidly, countries that really mean something, are the U.S. and Germany.
And Germany's Nicaragua, right, has just brought a genocide case against Germany.
Right. Yes. Which is
the irony.
Yeah, it was quite ironic, right? So and they have failed, of course, to uproot Hamas, and it seems like they just is something that they are unable to do. Now there's they've already taken a lot of flack. The support that they've been relying on in the U.S. and the West is starting to. It's still there. Again, I mean these governments are still backing them, especially the U.S. Though increasingly, even these Western European countries are now refusing to supply arms to Israel. So you are saying you're beginning to see a change in policy in those towards Israel from those countries.
What is the reason given for those countries to stop? Why are they saying?
Yeah, well, it's I don't know if they've actually admitted that it's genocide, but it's just unacceptable the way that Israel is prosecuting this war. I think maybe the most recent country to do that was the Netherlands. So this is these are major blows. Yet at the same time, within Israel, all the pressure that Netanyahu is feeling is not from the peace camp, which does not exist, but from the hawks to his right, who think that he's not doing enough, and they don't want him, to hold back. They want him to go into Rafah, and he has promised to do it. So he's stuck domestically, and I think it's also, he- um, domestically to survive. He has to prosecute this war. He has to continue, this genocide. If he doesn't, I think there was recently a member of his cabinet said that if he failed to go into Rafah, that would be the end of his coalition, and that would be the end of his presidency, which would mean the end of his political career and a very high chance that he was, spend the rest of his life in jail.
Right.
So just looking at his own personal survival, but just also just the fix that Israel's got itself into. No matter who becomes president, you're going to be faced with the same problem. We continue to go down this road. Our pariah status will become all the more obvious, and we even put our relationship with the U.S. at risk. I think, still they're getting solid backing, regardless of, rhetoric coming from the administration. They're getting solid backing from the U.S. But I think probably even they understand that there may be a limit, but they can't turn around. I mean, we've talked about it, in terms. I think it is just this orgy of bloodletting on, one hand. They've already dehumanized these people to the extent where they can't really recognize their humanity at this point. And yet, I think there's maybe somewhat of an awareness that, this just is not working out well for them. They may not be able to ethnically cleanse all of Gaza.
Right. So if it's not working out with well in Gaza, it's been a disaster. They become a pariah state because of this. They're seeing losing support like they've never seen before. The amount of support that Israel's lost has been irreversible at this point. It seems like.
Right.
And also their economy has suffered tremendously. The Israeli economy is in real trouble. Something like 20% of the Israeli population have already fled the country, right? And
Right.
and also, right, there has to be a huge amount of fear. I see footage and pictures of Israelis hunkering down in bunkers because they're preparing for this Iranian strike. So I'm just trying to think, well, why are what's the calculation to say like, okay, we did this and it's been terrible for
Right.
us, so let's go and attack an even bigger country.
Right.
Like I read, are they wishing for
Well,
destruction? Are they wishing to
no,
be
I don't.
wiped
I
off the
don't think
face of the
so.
earth?
Well, there's been this obsession with Iran, and I think maybe in Iran is always kind of put forward as an excuse, why we still have resistance to us. It's because Iran is backing them. And it's true that Iran has created this axis of resistance, right? So they call Iran the head of the snake. It's just like if we can take out Iran, then we've won. We don't have any real rivals still standing. That's the theory. I think that's even if, first of all, they can't take out Iran, but even if they did, they would have just created so many new enemies
Right.
and put at risk governments that have been friendly to them, corrupt governments that have been friendly to them, like the Al Sisi government in Egypt or the Saudi Arabians and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
They've put all those relationships into jeopardy. So, but this has been an obsession with Israel and with Israel supporters in the U.S. for decades.
So,
and there's always been a faction. There's always been this drive, to attack Iran. And maybe again, he finds himself in a position where not Netanyahu does, where if he goes, he's damned if he goes forward. And as far as he considers like a ceasefire, and that would just be a surrender. It would be a disaster domestically, even though the world community, would approve of it, but it would be a disaster domestically. So where does he go? Well, he's saying maybe this is the time to bring in the U.S. and make it a bigger war. And then, if it does, first of all, we destroy our arch enemy Iran with the help of the U.S. And while it's going on, we can do whatever we want in Gaza because eyes won't be fixed on it. It'll just be part of some large regional war.
So I mean, it's clear that Israel wants this war. They're the ones. They are the aggressors. Clearly here,
Right.
They're the one that struck the consulate, the embassy in
Right.
Syria. They've been really pushing for this. Does the United States want this as well? Because
No, well, there are people within the U.S. government that have always been pushing for war with Iran.
Lindsey Graham.
Right. Yeah. And, people within the State Department and the Pentagon who are just, who share Israel's obsession with Iran.
Right. The John Boltons, Mike Pence's.
Yeah. And whenever they have a chance, they push. But I think, clearly the majority, the cooler heads have prevailed. And I think probably still, the majority, as we could see recently, there was an opportunity to strike Iran. When the 3 soldiers were killed at the Jordan Syrian border there.
Well, why I asked that is because the United States did not condemn the Israeli strike on the embassy in Syria. This is such an easy thing to condemn. Like these are the rules. You don't strike embassies unprovoked. You don't just bomb somebody in another country, an embassy especially.
Right.
It's already terrible enough bombing some another warehouse or some structure with civilians in another country, but an embassy is supposed to be, like you're saying, this is one of the brightest of red lines.
Right. Something going back centuries. This is something that you do not do.
Right. You don't kill diplomats.
Right.
Don't
diplomatic. I mean, it's a very well established.
The rest of the world stood up and said, "This is clearly, condemned this. That this is not okay." Right. And so, if the United States does not want war with Iran, very easy. Just say, at least just say we don't condone what Israel did, but they couldn't even do that. Right. So, which makes me think, does the Biden administration actually want this war?
Right.
Why don't they just say?
Yeah. Well, I don't think they do, but the problem is that they, again, it's just that they are true believers in Zionism. They are. That they don't want the war in Iran. I think the majority of them, and we've seen that from like these recent incidents. I know that they're just not behaving rationally. There are contradictory.
It's an easy solution, right? I mean, you can just say, "Oh, well, Iran, they're bad, terrible things, but we don't condone striking consulates and embassies." It's not that much of a slap on the wrist to Israel. Just say, we don't think it's okay to strike embassies and consulates. That's a very easy thing, I think, for everybody to get behind.
Right.
I just don't understand why we can't say that. And I think because we never did say that, Israel has the idea like, okay, the U.S. is behind us.
Well, yes, and they're unfortunately right to think that.
So then we are potentially looking at a war with Iran, the United States.
Yeah. Well, again, it just is something. It's just that basically we've kind of the administration has sold its soul to Israel, and it's made this bargain with the devil. And, if you took the question of Iran separately and asked people, most say, oh, no, we don't want to, that would be a disaster. We don't. But, Israel can come into the room and say, declare its intentions or commit an act like it did in Damascus. And again, it's just like, okay, I know what I'll tell you, bro, we don't want to get in a war with Iran, but hey, Israel's Israel. I mean, it's just that they can't do anything differently. I mean, it's just that they have to declare their loyalty to Israel, whenever these things arise.
Even if it means that Biden's going to lose the election.
Well, okay, I guess they're just, they're not thinking clearly. They're just hoping that, well, okay, we make this declaration, but hopefully Iran won't strike back, or we'll pressure Iran not to strike, or we'll offer them something secretly, or who knows what's going on, behind closed doors. But of course, it's foolish. I mean, it's just, but these people don't think clearly. I mean, it's just that they have, they have their preferences, they have certain policies, but this alliance, or much more than this alliance, this commitment that they've made to Israel, and ends up trumping everything. And, it's just that Israel is taking them for a wild ride, and it's just like, okay, Israel's a bunking bronco and they don't know how to get off of it. And they're just hoping that it will end okay. But that's
well, what I think is something that's happening as well is, you mentioned before, and it's true, just that when Israel struck the embassy in Syria, the Iranian embassy, it got very little coverage in Western media. It kind of went radio silent. If you're following on Twitter, on these non-beholden social media platforms, you can see what's happening and that this was a huge escalation by
Right.
Israel. And I feel like the plan is we go radio silent on this, we wait for Iran to strike, and
Right.
then we frame Iran as the
Right.
aggressor. Is
Yeah.
that clearly what's happening here?
That's what's going to happen. Yeah, that's how it'll be framed, which actually just makes it all the more difficult for the U.S. to, to avoid being pulled into it.
Hmm.
That's the problem, is that when you just commit yourself to a lie, it's just, it's hard to stop lying. We'll just put it that
I
way.
can see the
Right.
Zionists on X saying like how already framing Iran as aggressor, just like
Right.
look, Iran is striking first. They're doing it's like how short are people's memories?
Yeah.
But the thing is, a lot of people may not see and not
Right.
even be aware. I was talking
Right.
to a friend of mine; he didn't even know that
Yeah.
about embassy.
Well, I noticed how it was reported in the New York Times this morning. It says that Israel is bracing an attack in retaliation for Israel killing a general who was working with Hamas and Hezbollah. So, in other words, they didn't even mention that he happened to be in a consular building when he did it.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, like if they wanted to kill a general, they didn't have to strike the embassy. It was clearly something that was
yeah.
to really.
Oh, they knew what they were
response.
doing exactly. Yeah, and so I think it was clearly, they knew they were going to take some flack against within the international community, which the true international community was, outside of the U.S. and its close allies. But I think they're going for broke. They're hoping for a war with Iran with U.S. involvement, and they may get what they ask for, which would be a disaster
for them,
and for the U.S. I mean, and for everybody. I mean, Iran doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. I think again, like I've said before, Iran has shown a great deal of restraint in the past, and maybe they can kind of walk that tightrope this time and just manage to retaliate enough, but not so much. But I don't. It seems like it's just so clear that Israel is going for broke, that whatever kind of retaliation occurs is going to become an excuse for some sort of massive attack by Israel, and then we have a war.
This is another possibility I think might happen. I'm trying to play 3D chess here. Is that I that news report that just I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that broke 2 hours ago said an imminent attack on Israel from Iran. That was coming from U.S. intelligence services, is what the article was saying. But I'm wondering if the Iranians are maybe trying to put out some false messages out there to keep them on their toes. First, they're probably enjoying the fact how terrified Israel and the United States are about this attack. But it could also potentially, I'm thinking from Israel's point of view, potentially make them try to strike first, which puts them even further on the back foot in terms of who is justified in this war.
Yeah.
Like that, because Israel has clearly shown that it's not able to exercise much restraint. It doesn't care about red lines. It doesn't care about international rules of war and engagement. It just does what it wants to do. So is it possible? I mean, obviously anything's possible, but do you think it's even probable that Israel will end up striking Iran before Iran retaliates?
Right. Oh, it's certainly possible. I mean, that's how the 1967 war, the Six-Day War, began. Israel struck first. It was preceded by a period of great tension, and then Israel struck. And they always said that it was preeminent. It was preemptive. They knew that the Arabs were about to attack, and they were forced to strike. But it was a war of choice. I mean, I think later investigations showed that no, the Arabs weren't about to launch an attack. It was a very tense situation, but quite clearly it was Israel made a choice to go to war. And then they framed it as, as defensive. So sure, it could happen. It could happen.
How would a war like this, what would it look like? Because it seems like this would be more of a, 21st century war. It's not going to be so many troops on the ground.
Right.
It's going to be missiles flying, and there's going to be mass casualties. Clear Israel doesn't care about civilian casualties. So what are we potentially looking at? Are we looking at just all of a sudden missiles flying up on all sides? What happens?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I mean, there are a lot of missiles there in that theater. I mean, both Iran and Hezbollah are well armed with very sophisticated missiles, and they can do a tremendous amount of damage to Israel. I think there's everybody admits that. But then Israel, I don't know exactly, what its stock of missiles is, but it's got
It's got nuclear bombs.
yeah, right. If it comes to that, that's right. But that also, they have um, the U.S. Navy just offshore, and that they're well armed.
If I was the U.S. Navy, I would be more afraid of Israel striking my ship and trying to do a false flag.
Right. Of course, that's happened. Right.
It's happened. It's right. It's happened in the past. We talked about the USS Liberty. How likely do you think something like that is to happen? Do you think it more likely that Israel would strike a U.S. ship as opposed to Iran striking a U.S. ship?
Well, um, I think it's more likely that it would be around. I mean, if it actually comes to war, I mean, like we've said, that these ships, especially these aircraft carriers, are very vulnerable. I think that's one reason why they're not in the Persian Gulf right now. According to my understanding, I think the U.S. understands how vulnerable they are, so they're in the Mediterranean. I don't know exactly what the range of these Iranian missiles are, um, but I'm sure it's they're also in the Red Sea, which is closer. I don't know, but it just seems like in this we have the U.S. Well, I guess I just have to say I can't put anything past Israel. I mean, it's certainly possible, and then you can't put anything past Israel's supporters in the U.S. I mean, it's just no matter what Israel does, whether just like with the USS Liberty, they nearly sank one of our own ships. 37 people were killed. Well over 100 were injured, and yet it was just, the whole issue was just was buried by the Johnson administration. Again, the survivors were told not to talk, and that was that. Now it just may be harder to do that now, but
right,
it has
especially
happened.
with the social media.
Right.
Well, I want to talk about sort of the public opinion that regarding Israel. But before we dive into that, I just want to ask which country, Iran or Israel, has a better air defense system? Because it seems like this war, like we said, it's going to come down to missile strikes, air strikes.
Right.
It's all going to be about air defense
Right.
and who's got the better missiles that can get by the other side's air defense. Israel has the Iron Dome.
Right.
Iran has hypersonic missiles that probably can't be struck by the Iron
Right.
Dome, but we haven't actually seen these hypersonic missiles in action, right?
No, I've just heard that they have them, but I haven't seen any reports of their use.
And we mentioned before that Russia by far has the best air defense system.
Right. Right.
Russia is closely, is would you say allied with Iran?
I think they're kind of working on an agreement right now, which may formalize an alliance. I mean, that may be just days or weeks away.
So if that happens,
but already, their ties are very close, and they're growing closer.
Does Iran have Russian air defense capabilities,
yes,
like the S-500 and the S-400?
I don't know exactly what they have. At least S-300s, which are actually quite good. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, that's what Ukraine had, and people were commenting, like in the early days of the war, actually, the first several months or year of the war, how where's the Russian Air Force? Well, the Russian Air Force held back because of this legacy Soviet system, which is just really very good, the S-300. I know they have at least S-300s, and they may have S-400s or S-500s. That actually, I think the Russians supplied them to Iran like better than 10 years ago. It was actually caused kind of a stir when it happened, because the Americans were pressuring Russia, not to do it, threatening them and so forth. But eventually Russia went ahead and supplied them with at least S-300s. So anyway, I think probably that the air defense system in Iran is probably better than what the Israelis have.
And Israelis don't have hypersonic missiles, right?
Right.
So, I mean, if you just have game planning, war games here, it looks like Iran would definitely have the upper edge. even with U.S. support, I don't know how much support U.S. could really do unless
Right.
we just start trying to nuke everybody, in
Right.
Iran. I mean,
Yeah. Well, let's just put nuclear weapons aside for
yeah,
just assume that that's not going to happen, at least at this stage. But yeah, I don't know exactly what the firepower is of the U.S. Navy there. But they certainly fired a lot of missiles, in the Red Sea and in this ridiculous, what is it, Operation Prosperity Garden
yeah,
or
Prosperity Guardian, right,
Guardian?
right.
Yeah, okay, right. Um, and that's going to flop. But I remember even weeks ago seeing reports on the dangerously low stocks of missiles that the U.S. flotilla there had. I mean, they were just using them up against the Houthis. So I don't know you know how much they have. There's a limit to, I guess, how many you can carry on a ship. And it's clear that like Hezbollah is supposed to have thousands and thousands of missiles,
Mm,
and I'm sure Iran has much more. Um, I'm not a military expert, but there's a reason why the U.S. has been very reluctant to to go to war with Iran. There are times, again, there are always those hotheads that push for it, but each time I guess there are enough generals in the Pentagon who know what's going on and say, no, you just can't do it.
right,
We can't promise victory. I think that's probably what the president ends up here. You could lose this if we do this. And then especially since we have all those bases in the region that, as Iran demonstrated, again back in 2020, they have the ability to target and strike. Every single one of those bases could be very quickly destroyed.
mm.
With the U.S. soldiers on them.
Well, Biden stated that U.S. support for Israel is still ironclad.
Right.
So we see that the administration and the deep state are still backing Israel till the hilt,
Yeah.
but public opinion is waning rapidly
Yeah.
globally, but in the United States at a rate that I couldn't imagine.
Right.
We talked about the breakthrough just a week ago, how it was just breaking through on the left, and you watched
Right.
some
Yeah, I went ahead and watched that MSNBC show that you recommended.
Iman, right?
Yeah, it was excellent. He showed the ugly face of this genocidal war. I mean,
Mm,
it was truly horrifying. And yeah, it's even a few months ago. I don't think a show like that could have appeared. I mean, it just that was so clearly harmful to Israel's image that it just would not have appeared anywhere in mainstream media. Um, but there it was, and that is a real breakthrough. I mean, that's something I've never seen in my lifetime. And of course, it's all thanks to Israel. It's just they by behaving so recklessly and yeah, they brought this upon themselves. Even people that were always inclined to support them, some of those people are saying we can't do it anymore.
right.
Yes, yeah, and that's MSNBC is clearly a kind of establishment left kind of media outlet.
Right. Jon Stewart also had an opening bit at the beginning of
Yeah,
this week.
right. Again,
And
very much an establishment kind of
right,
medium, but yeah, so that's very significant.
right. And he really laid into it. It just showed the hypocrisy of the United States, how when Russia did something, they're, condemn it on, wholeheartedly. And then Israel does the same thing, but 10 times worse.
Uh-huh.
The establishment's just like, oh, we have some concerns.
Yeah, or
And then,
we'll look into it as something that they say, and then you never hear about it
right, and
again.
nothing changes.
Right.
So we saw the left, but then also we were kind of saying, but it's a shame that the right is still firmly Zionist. But there's been some really real breakthroughs on that as well. I saw that support amongst the right has dropped 10 points in the
Right.
past month, or I'm not sure exactly across what time frame, but 10 percentage points really quickly.
Right.
And I think that's largely thanks to people like Candace Owens, who was kicked out of the Daily Wire because she just didn't support this mass slaughter of women and children in Gaza. And she spoke out against it very strongly and wanted to, you could see how Ben Shapiro just blew his top off and has
Yeah.
just been going crazy. But then also the big one with Tucker Carlson
Right.
interviewing
Munther Isaac,
yeah,
a Lutheran pastor in Bethlehem.
right. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that
It was part of the organization that your grandpa, my father actually was very much involved in.
Fosna,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
Mm,
Well, he actually led FOSNA, the North American chapter of it, right?
yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's been viewed tens of millions of times and shared, and I think it's caused a real sort of just an earthquake amongst some Christians. They're like, wait a second, and then they're seeing how Israelis actually treat Christians.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, no,
y-
that's very significant. Again, like I was saying, I think last time that um, people, whether you're on the left or the right, you come to trust, certain sources, and it may be because you're very concerned about one issue or a couple of issues, and you find that they're reliable on that. But you
mm,
don't understand that maybe that same source is feeding you lies about, other matters. And so, unfortunately, you saw on the right, a lot of people had come to trust these alternative sources that are probably very, very reliable and with regard to all kinds of issues, but all had we're all very strongly Zionist. And so, they say, well, that's what they're telling us about Israel. I trust this source. It must be true. But Tucker Carlson, again, he's somebody who can break through because he has a lot of, you know, um, let's say street cred on the right.
mm,
And I think, one reason why like the support for the Ukraine war is so low on the Republican side. I think that probably Tucker Carlson has an awful lot to do with
right.
that, because he has been regularly criticizing that war and providing the news that the mainstream media won't give you about that war.
And that's why he
But
was fired.
yeah, right, exactly. But now, yeah, he's doing the same thing with Israel, and just more power to him. And so it's very heartening to see that.
Right. Well, what do you think? How does this factor into the calculus for Israel? If they see public support declining rapidly, fracturing on what they thought the Christian Zionist base was so strong, and even that's starting to have, or there's a rift even amongst the diehard, evangelicals in the United States. They're losing the left. Does that make Israel want to sort of quicken the pace in terms of
Well,
escalation?
that may be true. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders may be thinking they've had these plans to create a greater Israel to cleanse this greater Israel of all Arab presence, of all Arab um, um, inhabitants. They've had that plan for a long time. I think Netanyahu has become increasingly open about that over the years. Um, and at the same time, they're saying that the support for Israel is starting to falter. It's still he's got the administration is firmly on his side, but I think that they have to some extent realize that this is not going to last forever. It just this may be the time to strike. This may be their only chance to achieve this dream of a greater Israel. While they still have an administration that's completely on their side.
It seems so dumb to me because all eyes are on Israel. The reason that they're losing so much support is they commit some type of atrocity, and then people say, "Oh, that's not good," and they're like, "Oh, we better do more atrocities more
Yeah,
quickly."
right.
Like
I guess.
that's their calculus. Like
Yeah. Well.
everybody's going to see
Yeah.
this.
Well, they know. I think they don't care in a way, or they've accepted that they're pariahs. But there's a part of them. Someone's like, oh yeah, the Jews are always,
Wear it as a
oh
badge of honor,
yeah,
almost.
it's almost like the victim. We're used to this. Yeah, the world. We can't trust anybody but our own people and whatever. So I think you get that kind of psychology. But then also, like we're saying, it's just they've gone so far down this road. It's just very hard to stop and just say, "Oh, okay, yeah, we kind of committed half a genocide, and let's have a ceasefire now." That's it's
Right.
yeah,
Can't
I
turn this
yeah,
car
right.
around.
That's something it's I think it's difficult uh, because it'll be seen as a failure. I mean, it will be if they stop now. They say, okay, now we're pariahs and we didn't even achieve our objectives in Gaza, and Hamas has survived, and they're being championed, and people are ridiculing us, and now we look weak, and now we're really vulnerable, and now somebody's definitely going to attack us. So, no, we have to do this. We just have to carry through. We have to, have this. You see this in war sometimes. We just have to be merciless. We have to put our normal human feelings, aside, and just carry through with an iron will.
So the cat's out of the bag. Then you're saying that this war is inevitable. Either genocide takes place and Israel takes over all the land and they achieve their dream of a greater Israel, or we're going to have a wider regional war. And just the question is just how is that wider regional war going to play out? Will it result in the United States being dragged in, potentially World War III with China and Russia backing Iran? I feel like the U.S. is just so weak right now that we wouldn't even be able to. I don't even think we have the ability to carry out a war.
Right. Yeah,
So
well, we can obviously do an awful lot of damage to a country. There's no question about it. Just like, Israel is doing a tremendous amount of damage to Gaza. Of course, Gaza is tiny.
right.
What is it? Something like 18 square miles, or I mean, it's just a tiny little place. And Iran is a very large and populous and well-armed country. It's completely different. And it has a strong ally, Hezbollah, to the north of Israel.
So what could the U.S. really do? Because I saw also a breakthrough. Is it Qatar and another country in the Middle East where the U.S. has bases? They've announced that they will not allow the U.S. military to use their bases to carry out any strikes against Iran. So our ability to even strike within Iran will be limited by these Middle Eastern countries that will not allow this to happen
Right.
because they know what. So which means that how would we carry out this war? We just on our ancient iron tubs floating in the ocean that are just going to get blown up. Like,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's going to limit what we can do. I mean, still, I'm sure that it's possible to to launch missiles at Iran from the Eastern Mediterranean. And
but
from
we don't have hypersonic missiles,
right.
so they will go slow. I think the likelihood of many of these missiles getting shot down is very high. So I just wonder how much damage.
Yeah, well, I can't.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
know you're
know.
not a
Yeah,
military
yeah. I mean, I
expert,
just don't
but
know. I have a rough idea of what the relative strengths are.
it
I'm
just
sure they can
seems
do a fair amount of damage, but the thing is that I think everybody, the U.S. military also understands that Iran can retaliate, can inflict quite a bit of damage on U.S. bases and possibly U.S. ships in the region.
right. So I mean this could end up with all these ships, U.S. ships and U.S. bases being blown up if we try to engage Iran. That's what will happen, right? We
Yeah,
have hundreds
yeah,
of bases in the Middle East, right?
yeah. I don't know about hundreds, but
Dozens at
yeah,
least.
something like that. Yeah, definitely. Within illegal bases in Syria and semi-illegal bases in Iraq. I mean, the Iraqis have asked the Americans to leave, and the Americans have refused. The Syrians have, made it. It's a part of an illegal occupation of eastern Syria. But we also have these bases in places like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, and yeah, there's quite a presence there, quite a lot of targets there for Iraqi, or not Iraqi, but Iranian missiles.
So just to sum up, there is no turning this ship around in terms of Israel escalating it to a larger conflict.
Well, it's you never say never because there are always surprises, and who knows. But it's looking. Let's just say, like, it's just the situation is much more dire than it was, like, even the last time we talked, or even let's say a week or two ago,
Mm.
and it's because of this obvious escalation by Israel. I mean,
Well, you just said that Israel can't stop.
right,
They
right. I
can't
mean,
do a half.
the only hope, or chance for something other than this kind of doomsday scenario taking place. Um, the only alternative, really, I think, the only way out is through the U.S. administration, and it is within the power of the Biden administration to put a brake on Israel. We've understood this. They could go beyond the rhetoric and the hand wringing and actually say, okay, that's it, it's over. I'm sorry, but I'm telling you, Netanyahu, you're not getting another bullet. You're not getting any.
Yeah.
But that's just not happening. And like you said, with this recently, they came out with this once again writing Israel a blank check in this case, in relation to Iran. Um,
Right. Not
So,
not condemning what Israel
yeah,
did.
right. Failing to condemn the attack on the consular building, and then also, yeah, then they're repeating that their support for Israel was ironclad without exceptions, and that's essentially giving them a green light. They may be telling them something different in private. Hey, we don't want you. But the fact is, like, Israel knows. Well, it's just a sign of weakness. If you can't say it publicly, that means you're afraid to say it.
Right.
And Israel knows because, okay, well, we can do it and you won't condemn
I
us.
feel like Israel will end up taking the gamble, and then all
It's
of a
kind of
sudden Israel will be under attack, and then the U.S. will feel like it has no choice
right.
but to back up Israel, and then all of a sudden we're involved in this conflict, and then we start seeing U.S. bases getting blown up,
Right.
and then that's crazy, right? Then
Yeah.
what happens? What
Yeah.
happens here?
Well, then it's just all hell breaks loose. And I mean, it just,
And so the chance of that happening, what would you put it at now? Over 90%? That's what I'm feeling right
yeah,
now. What
well,
you're saying is
yeah.
like that
Yeah, there's just this, yeah,
just add it up. It's like
yeah,
everything
well,
you're saying is like that.
right. I guess all I can say is just, yeah, I don't think the 90% figure is, maybe just, I'll just be a little bit more cautious and say 75% or something.
All right.
That's
Well,
what's
I'm
going to
saying
happen.
99.
Okay.
You're saying 75.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's hard to see a way out, but there could be, it could be that Israel, gets a call from, it receives some kind of pressure from the U.S., a real pressure. There might just be
Who would
that there,
call him? I don't think
yeah,
Biden can even
yeah,
dial a phone number at this
yeah.
point.
I know. It's just, that's a big part of the problem. We don't really have anybody competent at the top. In past years, we've had hawks and so on who have had at least some sort of sense like, okay, yeah, but we can't have World War III, and they've dialed it back. I mean,
Do you think?
but yeah, this time, yeah, I just don't have a whole lot of confidence that's going to happen. They had a chance to dial things back, of course, after, like you say, recently after the consular attack, and then after the reports of an imminent attack by Iran, and they didn't put
Right.
any.
I mean, we've been talking all about the Middle East, and because it seems like we're headed to a situation where you're putting 75% chance of all hell breaking loose.
Yeah, no, right.
And just basically what you're saying is that, just to sum it up, is that you can't do a half genocide. It's hard to say, oops, I'm sorry. So you have to carry through. And the U.S. support is saying that they're ironclad. They failed to condemn what has happened to the embassy in Syria. So it's basically given Israel green light, and Israel feels like they're losing public opinion so quickly here domestically that they have to just move this forward quickly. And like you said, they just can't stop and turn around. So it seems like unless some sanity happens in the United States and we pull back and say we're not giving any aid, it looks like this we're headed towards a
Right.
real escalation.
I think that's really the only hope is that, as we're saying, there is a shift in public opinion within the U.S. And, we've had like people resigning too from the State Department in protest of the.
But I feel like it's too late to turn around. We've already said our support's ironclad. Israel's already getting prepared and running out scenarios of striking Iranian nuclear sites and all these things. Can we?
Well, we can. I mean, the thing is, you could make a decision today to do it, no matter what you said. And then, these are the masters of spin. They'll come up with something. I mean, I'm sure there are some people, within the administration, because again, we have pulled back from the brink in the past, that are again saying, "Hey, we can't go down this road. Okay, look, this is really going to damage, or this is, I know you love Israel and you've got these great donors that are funding your campaign, but if this goes forward, it's going to be disastrous for you too.
Look,
there may be something we'll get through, and something really will be done in the U.S. That's my only hope.
Right
now, it's not a very strong hope, but it's my only hope.
Right, because
I don't see it happening within Israel.
Right, but because this retaliation from Iran is coming.
Yeah.
When it comes, I don't see how the U.S. could say now we're cutting off our military aid. Right, like that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
like once.
Right.
So I just don't see it happening. Maybe I'm wrong and cooler heads prevail, but okay, we're looking at a very high probability of all hell breaking loose in the Middle East, and at the same time, that another factor that could be maybe going through Biden's head. I mean, I think if he's using these two remaining brain cells, has one focused on Ukraine and the other focused on on the Middle East, and combined, he's just trying to focus on the election with these two conflicts. These are obviously big problems for him. And what's happening in Ukraine right now is it's clear that Russia is beginning to steamroll Ukraine. They've completely knocked out the energy infrastructure around Kharkov. They've struck infrastructure in Kiev. They're out without power, without electricity. So could Biden be thinking maybe a Middle East escalation is good because it will divert from this disaster in Ukraine if we have this, and I can do some more spin in the Middle East saying like, well, we got to help Israel. They're our friends and our allies, and they're under attack, and so could that be possible?
Oh, it's certainly possible. And I mean,
do you think that's what he's thinking? Or the
well, I don't think
administration?
I don't think there's much thought at all. I mean, they just
I'd love for
yeah.
somebody to do a CAT scan on that brain, see what's
Yeah,
wrong.
but I mean, it's not just Biden, but I mean, it's just the whole. I mean, they've made a mess of both of these conflicts, and there's been this muddled thinking and just this sort of assumption. I think always, well, no matter what, we're the U.S. Like that's exactly what Biden said. What was it a couple of months ago? Hey, we're the United States of America, man. It's just we're the most powerful country on earth, and I think there's that thinking is just there. The thing is, like the U.S. has made a mess of all kinds of conflicts, like in Iraq earlier and Afghanistan and so on. But in the end, we can walk away from it, and we got a powerful media to give it a certain amount of spin. You might, suffer some kind of damage, but it's never, never a disaster. I think they don't understand. Maybe they probably thought that that's the way it is. Again, it's just
Right.
we no matter what, we'll get through this. It may be they don't really care if there's a disaster on the ground and wherever, and people get killed in Ukraine or people get killed in Gaza or whatever. It's just that we're the U.S. and we support Israel, and they probably never really thought much beyond that. And we hate Russia. Now it's turning out very badly for them, I think. And I think the world is seeing this, and this is really maybe changing the calculus, the kind of the sense of possibilities that other countries have. I mean, it used to be up until fairly recently, all countries, including Iran, were, in awe of the U.S. and they just had to suck it up. They would suffer these terrible attacks and these cruel economic sanctions and assassinations and so on. And they say, well, look, if we fight back, we're just going to be destroyed. But they may be seeing, well, now the U.S. is, in a quagmire or is tied down in Ukraine. Israel is tied down in Gaza. They may be looking at Israel and the United States and saying, not feeling that awe that they used to feel towards them. That they don't have that. They realize that these people could lose. And maybe that's affecting, their calculations right now. And that's maybe the reason why they may risk a war, because they understand they could actually win it this time.
Oh man, I just feel like our leaders, our generals, the CIA, our intelligence, they don't have any ability to think more than one move ahead. It's just so clear that there's, why can't they figure this out? It's so they just like here's another thing. Like, okay, we go to war with Iran. We're the U.S. of A. We can do it. Iran immediately shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. We see gas prices go up 10 times.
Yeah. Well, that's something that
it's over. The election's over. People stop.
Well, that's something actually a reason for hope. There must be people whispering in Biden's ear or shouting in his ear, say, look, if this happens, you're going to lose. Gas prices will go, and that's something that he cares about. And so that might just make him to wake up enough to say, hey, Israel, we can't do this. We just can't. Okay. That's again, that's a reason to hope, but I know that would be the rational thing for him to do. It doesn't mean that he's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, just if you look at our track record, being rational is not really our cup of tea.
Right. Well, I think it's the problem. It's part. It's a rot of the brain sets in if you've been number one for too long. I mean, it's just that you start to think that that's sort of a God-given right. That's who you are, and how dare people think otherwise. And So you stop having to, people who are behind or weaker, or like the number two business or whatever that's trying to catch up with the number one. They've got to try harder. They got to, they have to learn to be mean and lean, and make the hard decisions. Um, and then if you've been at the top for a long time, you start to just have this sense of divine right. Okay, yeah, I'm just here because I'm just so amazing, and you stop having to make those hard calculations and realize that your power is limited. Like, maybe it's not a wise idea to make enemies of all the world, of the Russians and the Chinese. And then,
Right.
and
We haven't
the
even.
Iranians, now they're all together, and it's kind of like they're pretending that they're surprised. Anybody, with half a brain could say that, look, this is obviously what's going to happen. But they apparently decided, like, no, because we're America, China is just always going to be dependent on us. And they realize we're much more important to them than Russia is. And, and
It's yeah, it's so crazy. It's just, we haven't even talked about China. We should do an episode of China at some point. But this idea that we can antagonize these great superpowers around the world with no consequences is just, it doesn't make sense. Why would you want to do that? It's just, why can't we just work together and have mutually beneficial
Right.
relationships? I feel like our government, our military industrial complex only operates in this idea of a zero sum game. And we just got to blow the other people up in order to benefit.
Well,
Even though time after time has showed us that's not true.
Yeah.
We
right.
always,
Well, again, I guess it's intoxicating. It's just power, the sense of I guess, sort of absolute power that we had after the fall of the Soviet Union. It's what they call the unipolar moment. That was something that they just can't let go of. And yeah, they went ahead and did stupid things that actually obviously were failures and very costly for the U.S., like the invasion of Iraq. But yeah, who cares? We smashed up a country. We spent a couple $1 trillion, but hey, we're still standing. We're still number one. Who cares? We just, but it's a different world now. I mean, China is much more powerful. Russia is much more powerful.
Iran is much more powerful.
Right, exactly. And
even North Korea.
Yeah, right.
Apparently, they make some pretty good ballistic cruise missiles.
Right. I think they worked with the Iranians in developing. That's one of the. Iran has its own talent, obviously, and they've shown that they can be very sophisticated. But yeah, you make enemies of everybody, then.
One day, what do you think? You'll wake up and those enemies are bigger than you and more powerful than you.
Right.
Okay. Well, just to sum up real quick again, not looking good in the Middle East. Looks like we're heading towards something awful, hell breaking loose with Iran, Israel, U.S. potentially getting dragged in. How do we feel things are looking at in Ukraine? And part of me feels like the risk of it widening into a larger conflict is going down because Russia is just showing its absolute superiority militarily, just crushing the Ukrainians. There's no air defense. They're really, looks like they're gearing up for a big offensive to get to the, what's the river, the Dnieper.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've been hearing a little bit of chatter about Macron in his little Napoleon complex about sending troops to Odessa and the British sending troops in Zaporozhye.
Right.
How likely is that to happen? Because that's obviously a huge tripwire to get NATO involved in a war with Russia.
Right. But for example, I think Germany has already said quite clearly that, hey, if you go out there, on your own, you're on your own. It's not, you can't invoke Article 5 of NATO.
What about the U.S.? Germany is dealing with its second genocide case in less than 100 years. So.
Yeah, but I guess again the thing too is just like we've said, that the support for actually going to war with Russia and Ukraine is it seems to exist among some of these. Some of these vain and would-be Napoleons like Macron, but it does not exist in any significant way, among their citizens, their subjects. The support for Ukraine it's actually very shallow and it's falling. And I think maybe with the exception of some of the Baltic countries, you're just not going to find it. You're going to have fun. You're going to find that if there is, like for example, if Macron does send soldiers into Ukraine and then they get killed, a number of them get killed by a Russian missile. You're not going to have, people signing up to join the fight in, French citizens lining up at the local recruitment office. I think instead they're going to see the French doing what they do best and probably going to be rioting in the streets and saying, like, get the hell out of Ukraine. I mean, really, I just don't see the support for it. I think it's certainly possible. It seems like some of these people, especially the British and the French, really want to do it. I mean, these guys think that they have a chance to be the new Churchill or de Gaulle or something. And it's just, or Napoleon. But they're fools, and they don't have the support at home, and they don't have the military means to actually achieve any sort of a meaningful objective in Ukraine. So even if and then the same thing in the U.S., like the support for nobody's
right.
Yeah, we have a few crazies that are mercenaries over there, but other than that, nobody else wants to actually sign up and go fight the Russians in Ukraine.
Right.
I mean, it's not there.
Right. The conflict in Ukraine seems to be more of a ground war that involves actual real troops. What we're looking at with Israel and Iran is a little bit scarier because we're talking about just pushing buttons to launch missiles.
Right. Again, and I think both of them. Again, I don't know exactly what kind of missiles that Israel has, but you would think that they would be well armed. Sometimes you find out that no, they never really prepared for this war, and they're just depending on the U.S. We'll see. But yeah, it could be an exchange of a missile war, an exchange of missiles.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like I agree. I feel like the Ukraine war is winding down.
It still may go on for a while, but it just. I mean, but you're right. It's just like the Russian juggernaut is unstoppable, and I think everybody's starting to see that.
Right. That's what I meant. Not winding down, right. And in a way, it's accelerating. But to wind down, in a sense that it looks like Russia is moving more quickly. They have absolute superiority now. It doesn't seem like there's much that can stop Russia. Right. It is the juggernaut now. So I agree. I think that the chance of the Ukraine-Russia conflict widening into something larger, the idea, I think Zelensky's going home and praying every day that NATO will get dragged in, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Maybe Macron will be stupid enough to send some troops in there and get them blown up, which would be definitely an escalation, and tensions will be a bit high, and see how Western countries respond.
Right. Again, you can't say that I think it's improbable, that NATO will actually go to war with Russia. But again, it's just the stupidity of these people really seems to know no bounds.
Right.
And so there is a real danger. But again, it's just in the end, they have to have the warm bodies to implement their crazy plans, and I just don't think they have enough of them. I don't think there are enough people in Western Europe that really would be willing to go and fight.
Right. Yeah. So I believe that the chance of it widening is low. It's probably under, I don't want percentage, 5% or whatever under.
Yeah, which is still dangerously high.
1 out of 20. Yeah. Right. But I'd say under. But in Iran, I would say if I was a betting man of this widening into a larger war in the Middle East, I would have to put my money on yes. Because everything just seems to be moving in that direction with no ability to stop it.
Right. Yeah. You just don't see the brakes on the Israeli war machine.
Right. And that's what we said, a month ago when we first started the podcast. We were saying, where are the off ramps? We could see the off ramps in Ukraine and Russia, but we just don't see the off ramps in the Gaza-Israel war, and so far we've been right. There have been no off ramps. I mean, the only off ramp, like we said, is the United States
comes to a census.
Right. It says no more weapons, Israel, you got to stop. But we've again and again just should blank check, show no willingness to do that. So, and it might be too late to roll out that off ramp with this strike on the Syria.
It makes it that much harder, right?
Right.
If there is a retaliatory strike by Iran, it's a significant retaliatory strike. After all the demonization of Iran, that's part of the problem. Again, if you've been feeding your populace with lies, it's just hard at some point to actually say, well, look, let's look at this in context or whatever. You've been depriving them of the context, and you very purposefully did it again by, underreporting and pretty much burying the story about this very flagrant violation of international law by Israel.
Right.
And so now, yeah, if, like you say, if Iran retaliates, it becomes very difficult for the U.S. to put on the brakes. It doesn't mean they can't. Sometimes they'll come up with some really, lame explanation, but maybe, let's try to square the circle. And it's just going to be hard to do. That's all I say.
Okay, well, let's stop there. I think I need to go out and buy some 50-gallon drums and fill them with gasoline real quick before the Strait of Hormuz gets closed and all hell breaks loose. Okay, thanks a lot, Dad. Sounds good.